Today, I'll show you how to adjust your project settings in DaVinci Resolve so your timeline, frame rate, and other core options are set up the right way from the start. Getting these settings correct is really important because they affect how your footage looks, how smoothly it plays back, and how it will export when you're finished. First, make sure your project is open in Resolve. If you've just launched the program, you can either create a new project or double-click an existing one from the project manager. Once your project is open and you can see the main interface, you're ready to access the settings. Look down to the bottom right corner of the Resolve window. You'll see a small gear icon there. This is the project settings button. Go ahead and click that gear. As soon as you do, the project settings window will pop up. This window is where you control all the key technical details for your project. It might look a bit overwhelming at first because there are a lot of options and tabs, but we're going to focus on the most important ones you'll use regularly. One of the first things you'll notice is the timeline resolution. This setting tells Resolve how large your timeline should be in terms of pixels. Common choices are 1920 by 1080 for standard full HD, 3840 by 2160 for 4K UHD, or whatever resolution matches your delivery format. It's best to choose a resolution that matches either your source footage or your final output. For example, if you shot in 4K but you know you'll only deliver in 1080p, you might set your timeline to 1920 by 1080 for easier editing and smoother performance. Right alongside that, you'll see the frame rate settings. The frame rate determines how many frames per second your timeline will play back. Typical values include 23.976 or 24 for a more cinematic look, 25 for some regional standards, and 29.97 or 30 for common video and web content. It's important to pick a frame rate that matches your footage before you start serious editing, because changing the timeline frame rate later can be tricky and may affect how your clips line up. So take a moment to check what your camera recorded and match that here when possible. Next, you'll notice options related to color management. This is where you define how Resolve interprets and transforms the colors in your project. You might be using a simple timeline in, timeline out color space, or a more advanced color managed workflow. If you're newer to Resolve, you can usually stick with the default settings, but it's helpful to know this is where you'd switch to a color managed mode if you're working with log footage or wide gamut cameras. The choices you make here influence how your images look before you start grading, so treat these settings as the foundation for your color work. You'll also find audio settings in this same project settings window. Here, you can set things like the sample rate, the number of audio channels, and other technical details that affect how sound is handled in your project. Matching your audio sample rate to your original recordings or to your delivery specs helps avoid issues like playback glitches or unnecessary conversions. Once you've gone through these key areas and adjusted timeline resolution, frame rate, color management, and audio settings to your needs, don't forget to confirm everything. At the bottom of the project settings window, click the Save button. Resolve will apply the changes to your current project and you'll be taken